I haven't done it in a while, but I used to keep like a mental list of beef sector reads because there seem to be a lot of retreads as far as reads. A lot of reads are like repeated over and over, and some of them are kind of odd. I mean, there's like, you're fat, you're ugly. That's kind of like normal. Everyone, not everyone, but, people in real life use that all the time. Although I don't understand when people call someone who's objectively attractive ugly. That always comes off odd to me. Because I'm sure there's plenty of ways you could read them that are like factual. I like factual reads personally. I don't really get that sort of random, let me pull this out of my ass kind of reading of stuff that doesn't even make sense or isn't real. And then people in the chat are like, yeah, she totally like has a kangaroo for a pet. And you're like, what? Where did that even come from? But yeah, like, fat and ugly, that's normal and stuff. One I haven't heard in a while is side chick. Everyone used to be a side chick. Whenever someone was mad at someone else, the other person was a side chick. I guess to like delegitimize their relationship was somehow important. Like, yeah, you got a man, but he's married, or you're not his bottom bitch or anything like that. I honestly, and the thing is with insults is that insults say a lot about the person who's, leveraging the insult. Because, I mean, insults, to think of an insult, you have to think of your own personal experience. And so you have to think for yourself, what is the worst thing that a person could be? Okay, I know, and I'm going to call the other person whatever it is I think is so awful. So apparently a lot of people feel that being a side chick is the worst thing in the world. And I'm not saying it's a good thing or whatever, but it's a thing that happens sometimes with or without your consent or knowledge. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting. I mean, men and women were being called side chicks without really any proof, to be honest. Stank pussy, that's a popular one. Suddenly we know what other people's vaginas smell like, I guess. But that's another thing. The person giving the insult is thinking, okay, what's the absolute worst thing that can happen to a person? Oh yeah, they have poor hygiene and their vagina smells. Now, usually when people come up with something with that, or any insult really, when they're thinking about what the worst thing in the world is to call someone else, I think they're usually thinking about themselves, to be honest. Either they have a stank puss, or someone said they had a stank puss and it like injured them emotionally very deeply. And so, I mean, that's considered the lowest of the low. So suddenly, if you don't like someone, like the pH balance in their vagina changes and they've got a stank puss now because I don't like them. Being poor is a popular one. Poor, everyone's poor. Everyone doesn't have anything. And some people perfectly are fine with that. They own it. They say, I don't have anything. And so, it kind of takes the wind out of your sails when someone announces they're poor. But if anybody says that they had something or have something, then it means that they were poor and now they're not poor. But you can tell they were poor because they act like they never had anything before. So it's like, yeah, you're not poor now, but you were. And now you appreciate the things you have. So that means you used to be poor. How very dare you to formerly be poor, to grow up poor. And I mean, there are people, I have to admit, I feel that way sometimes with some people when they get a little too zealous to tell you what they have and stuff. It's like, girl, act like you've been here before. And going along with the poor thing, I suspect this is something that came from people, it's an insult popular with people who might have grown up in the hood. I certainly was hood adjacent growing up. And so being on crack, everyone's on crack. Do people do crack anymore? I haven't really seen much crack. Granted, in my neighborhood, no one does crack as far as I know. And you don't see you don't see any crackheads around here. So I'm not exposed to people of crack anymore. But yeah, a lot of people are on crack. But there's so many other drugs out there in the world. I mean, people could be on all manner of things besides crack. There's a world outside of crack, I promise you. You know what? I saw something on Lipstick Alley that they said was interesting, that some of the reads are so random. Some of the things that people focus on are so out of nowhere. Like, I think the weirdest read I ever saw didn't come from a content creator, but it came from someone in the chat. I can't even remember who it was about, but someone had shown their kitchen and they had a white refrigerator. And apparently someone in the chat thought that was just like the height of poverty to have a white refrigerator. If your worst problem is you have a refrigerator that is white, then you're doing pretty well. I mean, I guess, the style is to have stainless steel and stuff, but I don't know, if you're in a rental property and just happens to have a white refrigerator, I don't really see what the big crime is, but, whatever, to each his own. One I do not like, and I'm glad to see the sector generally frowns upon this, is the HIV, the health reads and stuff. That's not cool. And obviously it's something it's an insult leverage towards homosexual men for the most part, even though I think we all know that unfortunately the female African American population is another demographic group that is struggling, that is suffering from the HIV epidemic a great deal. I don't know. Once again, and it's been said before that, maybe people bring up HIV a lot because it's affect them personally. And I think that is the case with most insults. It usually comes from a personal place. You either have personal experience or trauma with it, or, somehow it resonates with you personally. And so that's, some people, not naming names, tend to jump to HIV, possibly for personal reasons. I wonder if COVID's going to be an insult at some point. I don't know. I guess we're all sort of, in this together. So no one's really like set apart. There's no like specific group that's especially prone to COVID. Well, I mean, there are groups that are more likely to succumb from COVID, but anyway, I'm just curious if in the future someone's going to be, if COVID is somehow associated with some underprivileged group, it's going to become an insult at some point in the future. Another one that I haven't heard in a while is scamming. Scamming was big. I want to say, I don't know, a year or so ago, everyone, if you didn't like someone, they were scamming, or if they got any kind of money, they were scamming people. One that bugs me personally, because at some point it's going to be leveraged against me, is when someone is said to be talking down to other people. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't people who do talk down to other people and are condescending and stuff like that, or have a condescending streak. I mean, there are people I like who do definitely have a condescending streak, but I think that term is overused because honestly, a lot of the time that term is used for someone who, uses SAT words, and it's easier to, rather than Google the meaning of the word yourself, you can just insult the person who used the word just to make yourself feel better. So I feel like that's kind of an insult usually against people who, know English. I think it's overused against people who know English and aren't afraid to use it, and used by people who, might not have had the advantage that those other people did have as far as education. And last of all, I would say mental illness is something that's said a lot. Granted, I think a lot of the time it is a perfectly legitimate claim to make in this sector. And I know I think it a lot. I don't necessarily say it, but I am definitely one I call myself an armchair psychologist, an armchair therapist. I'm also an armchair lawyer and real estate agent, but no one really wants those qualities. I don't utilize those qualities as much, but And no, I'm an armchair lawyer. I'm not a real YouTube lawyer, but yeah, I will definitely diagnose somebody. I'm not afraid to say it. And I have experience with mental illness, either personally experienced or I've seen it in others and stuff. And it's an interest of mine. So yeah, I do tend to overdiagnose. I am definitely a YouTube diagnoser, but so I personally think a lot of the times someone is called mentally ill, it's for a very legitimate reason. Because I mean, come on, look around us. Look at these people. So I can't think of anything else right now. If you can think of any insults that you find particularly peculiar, oh boy, that was hard to say. Feel free to write them down in the comments. I don't know. I just find them funny, and it really, honestly, it does say a lot more about the person who's saying it than a lot of the time than the person that they're talking about. I remember Alexander Rogers saying something really insightful. He said that when someone insults me or when someone looks at me, they're essentially, and when they insult me, they're holding up a mirror to them they're holding up a mirror to my face, but the mirror is facing them and they're basically looking at themselves and insulting themselves or calling out themselves. I know he said it better than I did. I'm getting so parched and I can't talk. But yeah, your insults do say a lot about you because it's coming from your frame of reference that is unique to you. And so, maybe that's another reason not to be so insulting to others. You might be revealing a lot more about yourself than you think you are. Just something to keep in mind. But as an armchair psychologist, I love it when people insult each other because basically they're revealing so much about themselves. It's kind of like when you're on a website and you right click and you do that inspect element and it shows you like the whole HTML code for that page. You're kind of doing that, for someone who has some insight. They can look through the insults and see what your own insecurity, they can read your HTML code and see what you're really dealing with on the inside. And I notice when I'm upset with somebody about something, not that I go around confronting them and insulting them, but when I get upset about somebody's behavior, it's usually because I've engaged in that behavior myself, or I'm like always suppressing that kind of behavior in myself. So I'm especially critical about it when it's demonstrated by somebody else. So I don't know. I mean, I guess we got a bunch of side chicks or something in the sector who are who are mad at the other side chicks or the perceived side chicks. So anyway, just something to be mindful of.